Tyson, it's week 7, and we've got an exciting one. We've got Sean Payton and little Jordan Humphrey looking for his revenge, leading the Denver Broncos into New Orleans to take on what looks to be a pretty decimated Saints team. But lucky for us, we've got Alvin Kamara, who can pull out a reliable 5 touchdowns on a primetime game for us. So we're going to have to find some fun stuff to play on this one. I don't expect an exciting game as much as I'd love to say I'm excited for these on the openers. But who knows? Maybe it's the Bo Nix, Tim Tebow breakout week.
This one looks real nasty. DFS wise, there's just not a lot of clear cut options besides Kamara. And it's kind of one of these games where I feel like, or one of these slates where I feel like there's plenty of opportunities for unique builds. Most likely that 500K up top, it feels like that can be soloed in this one without getting too weird, leaving money on the table. Talking about potentially sort of a Kamara captain, maybe fade, embrace him in the single entry at captain or the cash builds. But for GPPs, for big contests, I feel like, a Kamara under the field or fade at captain specifically might be in play. Let's get into this. What is up, guys? Welcome to the Edge DFS. My name is Tyson Smith, joined by Ellie Hernandez. Ellie, this one does not look fun. I will say that. Looks like, it's a Thursday night game. You've got a lot of narratives going on in this game. The Saints are absolutely decimated, dude. We'll get into injuries here in a minute, but Spencer Rattler quarterback, he looked okay last week. He looked pretty good in the first half, kind of fell off in the second half there. Kamara still put up his, 15 to 20 sort of fantasy points that you'd expect. But, without Shaheed, without Olave, without Taysom Hill, with the banged up offensive line, I'm worried that Kamara might not have opportunities in the red zone because they might not get to the red zone. This feels like, a tough matchup, being decimated, but going up against the Broncos defense that on paper is really good. They're going to be without Patrick Surtain this week with a concussion, which is a big deal. But when you're going up against wide receivers that you haven't really ever heard of, maybe it's still, heavily in favor of the Broncos in this one. They're favored on the road, which makes sense. I'm seeing, according to Draftkings here, there's more money coming in on New Orleans, being home dogs. People are probably just putting money on the money line. But I just don't see, I don't see the Saints being able to put up points. I don't see the Saints being able to move the ball. This feels like a Broncos defense with a kicker sort of slate. Most people are probably going to jam in Kamara at the captain. They're going to put a defense in the flex. They're going to put a kicker in the flex, and they're going to rotate out some of these, Cortland Sutton's, Javonte Williams, a quarterback here, Bo Nix, Spencer Rattler. I feel like we just got to get a little bit different in this one. We got to think outside the box a little bit more. And the first lever I pull to do that is just not playing Kamara at captain. If they can't move the ball, he's just not going to get as many opportunities to touch the ball. And he's banged up, dude. Like, he got banged up in that game. He had a rib injury. I think he broke his finger or something. He was on the injury report this week as limited with a hand injury, but I think he's got a hip injury. Like, there's a lot of things that could go wrong in this game for Kamara, especially if the Broncos come out and put up some points right away and they're playing from behind. The Broncos blitz, Vance Joseph blitzes the most in the league. Going up against a rookie quarterback, Rattler. What are you seeing in this matchup, man? And how can we just try to think outside the box with our builds?
I think the biggest thing here is I'm really not a big fan of narratives, but I didn't say this in the intro. We didn't cover this, but what is it? Drew Brees Day. It's his Ring of Honor induction ceremony, and I'm sure Sean Payton would love to spoil that with this team, right? And I think you hit the nail on the head. The Saints are just so hurt at the just really every position that I think this really is an opportunity for the Broncos to kind of get back on track, right? I know their offense looked a little inconsistent last week, a little, right? They were two different teams in the first half and the second half, and that's kind of just the story of what Bo Nix. But this is an opportunity to get back on track. Defense has been playing well. I think you can continue that trend even without Sertan out against the beat up Saints. But this game does just bode for general sloppiness because of the amount of injuries playing. This is what I mean. Have we had two rookies play each other yet this year? We got two rookie quarterbacks playing, one of them unintentionally. So there's so much uncertainty in this game. And quite frankly, if I'm Denver, I'm selling out to stop Alvin Kamara. Right, everything 8-man boxes. You will never see anything less than an 8-man box. Right,
Yeah.
everybody's going to be there to stop AK.
Yeah.
If I don't, we've never heard of these wide receivers. We're gonna get to that part, and we're gonna do like full biographies. We're gonna need like background checks on these people. Like I've never heard of them. So like that's what we're running into. Make one of these no name guys beat your second string quarterback, your backup to Patrick Surtain. Like these are good players. Anyways, I'm
Yeah.
ranting.
Yeah. It's a 37 total, dude. I mean, it feels like everybody, is gonna flock towards the kickers indoors here, gonna flock towards the defenses, specifically the Broncos, in my opinion. I'm not seeing super high ownership on them right now, on a Wednesday night at 8:40 p.m. Eastern. So I'm sure those numbers will go up as we get closer. Let's get into injuries, and we could spend an hour talking about this, but we're gonna try to make this pretty quick here.
Yeah, just pain. It was pain everywhere.
All right, so let's just start with Kamara here. All right, so he will be playing. He's not carrying a designation. I know maybe on Draftkings right now. I know on SaberSim he's still got a questionable by him, but this injury report came out maybe 2 hours ago or something like that. He's not questionable. It doesn't mean he's not hurt. There's this tweet here. I believe this was like during the game or maybe after the game. Alvin Kamara is playing with a broken rib, a broken ham, and a hip injury. The fact that he's out there is a miracle. And according to the injury report, it's just a hand injury for Kamara with limited practice all week. So he was limited. I know it's Thursday, so I guess pretty much everybody's limited if you think about that. It's just varying different amounts of walkthroughs. But Kamara being hurt, look, there's two different ways of thinking about this. The Saints, their season's on the line at this point. I know it's crazy to say that week 7, but they're 2-4. They've lost 3 straight games with Derek Carr, or 2.5 games or whatever. But they still haven't been looking good, even before all these massive amounts of injuries came down. So there's two trains of thought here. Do they say, we got to win this game? Kamara's our best player. We don't really have anybody else. We're going to feed the hell out of him, no matter if he's hurt or not. I think that is a viable option. Does he get 30 touches in this game? I think it's possible. But there's also the other side of it that he's so banged up, they're going to need to, and he's going to be active. They're going to feed him when necessary. But maybe he gets a drive off here or there. Maybe he is not in the game in a red zone opportunity. Maybe we see more Kendry Miller, who's active in this game. So let's talk about that, and let's talk about our strategy behind Kamara, because he's the biggest deal. As of right now, we're seeing like projected ownership of 40% at the captain, dude. And I get it. Like, he's the best player on the slate by far. But what if he just gets 13 fantasy points because the Saints cannot move the damn ball and they can't do anything in this game? Not playing him at captain, you're going to have just massive amounts of leverage. Play him in the flex all you want, but maybe just think about changing it up when it comes to your captain builds, because how many captain builds with Kamara at captain out of 200,000 entries? How are you going to be unique? You're going to have to get a less than 1% owned guy or something, or just build the craziest builds. So let's start there with Kamara, because I think that's obviously the most important question, is how we're going to handle him.
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest way to come into it is just approach it. Maybe you're willing to run more captain with single entries or cash games, and then in GPP you only put him in the flex. But I got to be honest, dude. His ownership is just so high, and he's so clearly the best captain play on this slate that I don't think we've run into this in a while. Where because of all the injuries, you you can easily play him as the captain and build whatever you want, right? So, I don't know, man. Like, I just don't know that even if you get the nuts on the captain lineup with Alvin Kamara, there's a chance that you could end up with chopping it just so many ways because there's so many limited options, or because he's so owned, there's so few lineups that are low enough duplicated that you can make an actual profit off of. So I don't know, man. I might be being a little dramatic here, but I mean, that's just a crazy amount of ownership at the captain spot. And again, it is a short week. This team, to your point, their season is on the line, but at the same time, like, so is like next season. If they lose Alvin Kamara to another season long injury, right, because they're being stupid, like what is the long term Saints move we're playing forward, right? Are you going to get rid of Kamara, Derek Carr, or Chris Olave? Like, everybody's hurt. You just bubble it up, let everybody take a couple days off, take for the rest of the season. I know it sucks, but man, like, you have nobody left. And I know I kind of digressed a little bit after Kamara, but I think there's a real reason to maybe limit your builds and maybe do half and half. Like, I still get a healthy amount of it because he will have a game with 5 touchdowns. We've all seen it, and it
Yeah.
fucking sucks
Yeah.
because you can't do anything if you don't have him in captain, right?
Yeah.
So, like, you have to get those lineups, but build some with the narrative. If you think that he's going to be limited, which I do, I'm going to have some lineups, like a decent amount of lineups, where I'm just absolutely fading him 100% and not having any exposure to him, because I do think there's a world where he's limited and doesn't get there because of the injuries on a short week.
And with all of the value that we have on this slate, first of all, set a cap on your salary if you're going to be unique for this one. I usually don't do that, but I think you kind of have to in this one. To me, because of all that value, and because he's just the only guy that I feel comfortable clicking, if I'm hand building or whatever, I'm clicking his name first at captain, like almost every time. Because who else? I mean, yeah, we have some other options that are good, but you're not feeling comfortable. You know, usually on these slates, there's at least 2 or 3 guys that you're like, okay, I could see him going off. And, you know, maybe there are a couple guys on this slate that you could that you think that about. But for me, Kamara is clear cut, easiest, most comfortable decision at captain. And to me, that makes me not want to play him at captain. And if he has one of these, if they drive down and he scores a touchdown right off the bat, well, guess what? I'm going to bed early, and I'm moving on to the Sunday slate. That's just as simple as that. So briefly, everybody already kind of knows about all these other injuries. Olave concussion out. Shaheed dealing with the meniscus injury. He's going to undergo surgery, and we're going to figure out how bad it is. Hopefully it's not bad. Carr, I didn't even realize he was doubtful for this game. I thought that he'd already been ruled out, but he's not going to play. Taysom Hill, doubtful. I was hoping that he was active for this one because he would be one of the other guys that I would just massively jam into captain. Having Taysom there and being able to play a lot of different roles and get involved in a lot of different ways. Like, you paid him for opportunities like this when you need him, and he's just not available for this one, unfortunately. You got Bub Means led the rest of the wide receiver room in week 6, 50 snaps, 8 targets, 5 receptions, 45 yards, and a touchdown. We're going to have to talk about some of these guys on the Saints side. Their offensive line is jacked up, dude. So I put the key in there. Red text equals weakest link. It's a whole freaking offensive line. They're ranked number 28th. I believe they gave up 5 sacks in the second half on Rattler. And for whatever reason, PFF boosted them up 2 spots. So on the Saints side, we know they're banged up. I think they're on their 3rd right tackle at this point, or actually their 3rd center, I think. Their offensive line's banged up and they're not playing well. So that's another reason to consider. Like, I know that Kamara gets involved in the pass game, and he gets involved in so many different ways. He's touching the ball, and that's why you want to play him. But dude, this offensive line is so tore up. like I said, I'm just trying to talk myself into being comfortable not playing Kamara at captain, but I don't think I will be comfortable. The only other one to talk about here really is Pat Surtain, concussion being out. You have Damari Mathis questionable, Baron Browning, McGlinchey questionable. Anyways, man, what else? Obviously, the big news here is on the Saints side. What does this do to you? I mean, to me, it just feels like every player on the Saints is in play for me for GPPs. Like pretty much every player.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I just think I think this could easily turn into like a preseason game, man. If Kamara like twists his ankle on the first drive or something, I think we could just see some random shit coming out of this, out of the Saints offense. You know what I mean? Maybe we
Yeah,
just see 80% Kendry Miller from that point. So to your point, like I think really the strategy on this is just capping your salary. And if you cap your salary for normal slates, this one, like I'm talking like 2,500 is where you would start by capping, right? Bring it down to like
yeah,
47.5. And even then, this is like whose line is it anyway, where the points don't matter, the salary doesn't matter on this slate. Just build a lineup you're
yeah.
comfortable with because I don't know, man. These injuries just opened up so much.
I promise you, you're not going to be comfortable with any of them. And if you are, you probably shouldn't play that lineup, honestly. All right, let's get into this
Right.
breakdown. All right, so we're in Saber Sim here. So, based on that salary conversation, and the Sims are going to be dialed in a little bit more as we get closer. We're talking about this the night before, but based off of my builds, it seems like to me, what was my point here? I was getting to something. Oh yeah, salary. So it seems like to me, like the top rated lineups for these bigger GPPs were in that 48,000 range, like right in that range. I was getting some in the 47,000s. My lowest lineup out of like 260 lineups in my pool was like 4,400 or 44,000. So I think the salary cap, whether you're hand building, just mentally keep a note of it, or in an optimizer or Sims, I think you got to put it on. Bo Nix 9,400, Spencer Rattler 9,200. Look, I get like we've seen quarterbacks priced down. I was expecting these guys to be in the 8K range, or at least Spencer Rattler, like at 8,600 or something. I don't think it matters. Literally, these salaries do not matter on this slate. So it is what it is. If these guys were all under 9K, there'd be nobody to play. It'd be hard to max your salary out. So I get it. But Bo Nix, to me, man, he looked pretty good at the end of that game against the Chargers. In that fourth quarter, he had 2 touchdown drives. At the end of the game, he drove down using his legs a lot. And Cortland Sutton had some opportunities, and he drove down, I think, to like inside the red zone. They decided to kick the field goal to try to get the onside kick, and it didn't work, of course. But he looked pretty good in that fourth quarter. He has not looked good in the first half. You sent me a tweet that was basically the biggest discrepancy between first half QBR and second half QBR goes to Bo Nix. He's looking above average in the second half and looking absolutely terrible. What was that stat? He had like minus whatever yards at half a few weeks ago. Even last week, he had only like a handful of passing yards in the first half. So it's not going to be pretty. But the fact that this guy can run the ball, he can get outside the pocket, make some plays. And Cortland Sutton, he's not one of these guys that you're happy to play in fantasy, especially like any sort of season long or anything. But I think for a showdown slate for this team, going up against a defense that gave up 51 points to Tampa Bay last week, Baker absolutely crushed them. I think you got to consider like passing stacks with Bo Nix and putting Bo Nix at the captain spot. What are we doing with Bo Nix, man?
Yeah, I like Bo Nix a lot. The Saints, they've had a bit of a tough quarterback schedule over the past couple weeks. Baker Mayfield, Pat Mahomes, Kirk Cousins, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, right? But they've been giving up 300 yards plus in pretty much every game except for the Atlanta game. So I think you're right on, man. Like Bo Nix is just a guy you got to keep an eye on. I'm going to have a decent amount of him. I like him at captain. Um, and it's not because he's the best quarterback in the world. He looks fine, but he's getting what, 5, 6 rushing attempts per game. He's got the ability to go out there and get 30, 30, 40 plus rushing yards and a touchdown. This is the kind of slate that we're going to need something like that on. And I mean, if they're pushing up the ball up the field, it's not because they've been consistently running it, right? They're running games. Their running backs haven't necessarily been the best. But look, I like Bo Nix a lot. At his price, I think he gives you a lot of flexibility, even though the salary doesn't necessarily matter on this slate. And then Spencer Rattler is an interesting one, man. Denver defense really hasn't allowed many yards or just anything in general when it comes to the passing game. Patrick Tan is out, so I would say that's good for like 50 yards and maybe a touchdown, or maybe at least 3 points. But in general, this defense is pretty solid. So I think you need to have a healthy exposure, but this isn't a slate where I think you're forced to play both quarterbacks, or that you should even, just because you have the flexibility to do so financially, right? I do think you're okay to consider builds with just one quarterback, and even potentially neither, right? Bo Nix could absolutely not get there and be some bullshit like 2 for 17 with 29 rushing yards and -2 fantasy points, right? Like, just one of those ultimate Tim Tebow lines. That's what we got to be prepared for. So that's the kind of game we're looking at. 37-point total with 2 rookie quarterbacks. Lots of injuries. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I think you can consider lineups with just one of these guys and potentially lineups with none.
The issue with Rattler is, who the hell is he throwing the damn ball to? Unless Jawan Johnson has 15 targets. And I get it. These are professional wide receivers, and they're going to get some targets. They're going to get some opportunities. But last week with Shaheed and Olave, it's like, okay, like I played a lot of Spencer Rattler for main slate because he was so damn cheap, and he was looking pretty good. And then second half came, and it all went downhill. I think you got to get to some. He's not like one of my favorite plays, but I do think he offers a little bit of rushing upside. It's a good question. Like, how many, like for the field, how many lineups are we going to see with 2 quarterback builds, just because there's just no one to play? And you're just like, you're trying to fill in spots and you go, screw it, we'll put it in Spencer Rattler. I remember him in college. Maybe you can be unique by playing 2 quarterbacks, but in a 37 total on Thursday night, 2 rookie quarterbacks, I'm probably going to try to avoid that and stick with some of these pass catchers who in one play can get you there. That's probably how I'm handling this. Let's move on to running back. Let's start with, screw it, let's go New Orleans. Kamara is 11.8K. Who cares what his price is? I know he's expensive, but you could pretty much do whatever the heck you want on this slate. We've talked most of the show about Kamara because I think he's basically the key, and deciding on what you want to do with him. If you just want to eat the chalk and then just get weird in the flex with your builds, your construction, I don't see anything wrong with that. But for me, at the captain spot, I'm just not liking that 40% projected ownership, and I think it could be even higher because of all the value we have. So what are you going to do with Kamara? Based off the fact that there's no one else on this team, is that actually helping you want to play him? You'd think it would, but for me, it actually is worrying me with the injury and the amount of workload he's going to get to. Can they even move the ball to get down into a scoring opportunity against a pretty good defense? I don't see it happening. I see a lot of punts in this game. So you get to halftime and Kamara's got 4 fantasy points and you're freaking out because you got 96% of him and 40% at the captain spot. That's not going to be fun. Also, what's not fun is Kamara getting 3 touchdowns at halftime and you don't have any of him at captain. So they're both scary situations. I'm more likely to be way over the field in the flex and just fade at captain. What are you going to do?
Yeah, man, I think I might have a couple just random bullets with Alvin Kamara at captain just to hedge myself a little bit. But outside of that, man, I think you're just I'm going to knock on wood here because last time I said this, James Cook had, 3 touchdowns? Like, I do think there's a world in which you just consider fading him at the captain spot. Again, don't fade him at the flex. I'm going to have some lineups where I have no Alvin Kamara in general. right? And I'll probably be on the field, under the field, in comparison, uh, to my ownership. So like I think look, I think it's something to consider. He's easily the biggest leverage play on the slate, right? And if you don't want to put a salary cap on, that's the easiest thing to do. Remove him from the captain spot, and you probably don't even need to put any rules in your lineups and just submit whatever the Opto spits out.
Yeah.
You'll probably be okay. Anyways, right? That's an oversimplification, but it does give you a lot more flexibility just to worry about, just to avoid duping. Again, if you hit the nuts on this and duplicate, like it's likely you're not going to make too much money with Alvin Kamara captain.
I've got like 7 to 10 usually like single entries. I will embrace him in the single entries, no doubt. And hope that, if he does go nuclear, that one of those single entries can contend for a top spot and maybe save my night. But I'm just not gonna do it in my GPP builds. And I usually do a handful of bullets into the big contest. I usually just do the mini max, all the 20 maxes, just all those lineups that I can. I don't play a ton into the big contest, but in those handful of lineups that I build for that big contest, I'm just going to fade Kamara completely in those couple of lineups. Kendry Miller is 2,400. He's coming back. This guy has shown some promise, but he hasn't really ever really stepped up as that like clear cut, like thunder lightning kind of back situation with Kamara. But I think in a game where Kamara is banged up, and if you do choose to play a lineup or a handful of lineups without Kamara at all, maybe you want to go with a guy like Kendry Miller. I don't know how much run he'll see, but maybe he sees a lot more run with Kamara being a little bit banged up. A guy like Jamal Williams, 3,600. He's we all know his history of getting into the end zone. He didn't do it last year until the very last game, right? I think with the Jameis Winston call. I don't see it really happening here because I just don't have a whole lot of faith that the Saints can get down inside the 5-yard line. Like too often. And at that point, you're probably going to want to stick with a guy like Kamara so you could throw him the ball potentially. I'm not really going too crazy on Jamal Williams. He's coming in around 2% owned. Kendry Miller is coming in around 3 or 4% owned. I'll be way above that. But a guy like Jamal Williams, maybe I'll just be with the field. Anyways, what are some of these other running backs? How are we handling them?
Yeah, man, I'm with you. I'm not really getting too much of, if any, Jamal Williams. I think Kendra Miller's the guy that you want to get to. If you're looking for value, again, I think I'm just programmed to say that at this point. But 2,400 probably isn't. Maybe it's just DraftKings pricing and uncertainty of what they think his role is going to be. But there's a good chance that we could see Alvin Kamara, if he's really healthy, as they say. There's a reality that he lines up at wide receiver sometimes, and Kendra Miller is on the field at the same time as Kamara. So they have him there because they wanted to give him snaps. They kept him on the roster despite his injuries, right? And now he's here and ready to go. So I don't think it's all for naught. So 2,400, I like Kendry Miller. Jamal Williams, don't like him very much. Adam Prentice, I think he just plays fullback, to be honest with you. And then Jordan Mims, I think he was just getting that Kendry Miller run while he was out. He probably won't be active.
All right, let's go to Denver. Javonte Williams is 8,800. Jaleel McLaughlin's 58. Audric Estime, 400. And then you get a fullback, 200. So Javonte Williams, I was watching this YouTube, I think it's Brandon Perna YouTube show, kind of a comedy show. And he's a big Broncos fan. And he brought up a good point. Like, Javonte Williams has never been great. Like, we he got hurt and we thought, oh man, this guy has so much potential. And maybe somewhere deep in my brain, I just immediately, he was a good running back, like potentially great running back. I mean, his best season, he put up 900 yards and 3 touchdowns. He didn't have a good year last year. He's not really tearing it up this year. Javonte Williams is probably like, besides the quarterbacks, probably one of the only other guys that you're super comfortable getting a ton of exposure to, in the captain spot and the flex. But, I don't know what to think about Javonte Williams. I'll play him quite a bit. I mean, he's going to be about 50% owned, maybe 15% owned in the captain. You're talking about playing a a pretty inconsistent guy. We think he has the talent, and I get that the Saints gave up a ton of yards on the ground last week. So you'd think that a guy like Javonte Williams is a good play. I don't. I think he is, but it's just 12 fantasy points output. I could see that happening. I don't see him getting a 30-point game or anything crazy like that. So what are we doing with Javonte Williams here, man?
Yeah, man. I don't know that Javonte Williams. We haven't seen it yet this year. I mean, his season high is 67 yards, and I know it probably has a lot more to do with just the way that the offense is styled and how many different running backs that they got getting volume. But um, I think what matters is this game specifically. Again, 37-point total. 6 points might be in the optimal lineup, right, in the flex. So at this point, like, you just need to start capturing those raw points. Javonte Williams has 3 receptions for 20 yards and 40 rushing yards. That may be enough fantasy points to be in the optimal lineup.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
again, like, I think he's probably a part of your core, right? If you just start like by process of elimination, guys that you want to kind of build around. Like, I think you can bump him up into that Bo Nix, the quarterback range, right? Like you were talking about. There's going to be a handful of people that I'm okay with building around, and Javonte Williams, a guy I'm comfortable getting some exposure to. Now, I'm not saying go get 60% of him, but 35 maybe. I think you're fine. Maybe 5% at captain if you're doing MME. You're fine if he goes and gets his 2 touchdown game. But again, I don't know that that's necessarily what we're expecting here.
So McLaughlin and Estime. So let's talk about this. Who you liking more? I mean, it doesn't seem like McLaughlin's getting a ton of run. Does a guy like Estime come in and get some run? He's $400. Like I said, on a slate like this, I feel like all these dudes are in play. Like, do we see another, third string running back sort of take over that secondary role, or give Javonte a breather every drive or two? I don't know, man. What are we thinking about some of these backups?
So I guess the one thing that we got to consider too is the Saints just haven't been very good at stopping the run either, right? Uh, what is it? Rashad White isn't a very explosive back, and what Sean Tucker and Bucky
Bucky,
Irving just came in,
yeah,
absolutely decimated the Saints defense. So,
yeah.
like, I don't want to backtrack really my commentary on Javonte Williams, not putting out as much as we've expected. Right? If there is an opportunity to get right, this is a good opportunity. But to your point, I think. I think you can consider like a guy like McLaughlin or even a teammate. McLaughlin's a little bit pricey, but again, salary doesn't matter on this slate. But he's a guy that can get involved in the passing game a little bit, where you need to have dump off passes available for rookie quarterbacks, especially rookie quarterbacks like Bo Nix, who is essentially a running back who can throw it a little bit better. I don't know, man. I think you got to sprinkle some of these guys in. Audric Estime at $400 is going to get forgotten about just because like nobody's going to be playing a $400 guy on a slate where you can do whatever you want, right? So if he's active, I think he's worth taking a flyer on at 150 max.
Like, if you're building lineups and Jaleel McLaughlin is like your second to last guy in your lineup, or your last guy, literally just switch, like, build one with Jaleel McLaughlin and then build another one with Estime instead of McLaughlin and leave like $5,000 on the table. Like, I totally think that is a totally viable way of building for the slate. Let's go to wide receivers. Let's get through this. There's so many no-name guys here. We got to talk about all these. It's going to take a little bit longer, but let's try to get through this. Cortland Sutton looked pretty good last week. He had a nice touchdown catch. To me, besides Kamara being the most obvious play, I think at captain, I think Cortland Sutton is number 2, and I think I'll probably have the most Cortland Sutton in this game. I really do. I feel like Bo Nix can come out and put up one of these like signature type passing performances in a game like this where there's just so many damn injuries. And Sutton's probably the guy that benefits the most from that. He's 10.8K. To me, I feel like everybody's going to want to jam in Kamara. And like, I feel like based off of the ownership I'm seeing for Cortland Sutton potentially being 3 or 4% owned in the captain, that's insane to me. Like, To me, because he's a little bit more expensive, maybe people aren't wanting to play him, or maybe just because it's Cortland Sutton. But I'm fully comfortable, spending up a captain to get him because of all the value. Vile 4,400. He was one of these guys that was getting a lot of looks last week. I think he had 8 targets. Am I wrong about that? He had a pretty decent game. And in that fourth quarter, when they were moving the ball, he was the guy who was getting most of the looks. Troy Franklin, Bo Nix's teammate at Oregon, I believe, had a touchdown reception. He's 3K. Little Jordan Humphrey revenge game. Maybe, yes. Yes. Play some little Jordan Humphrey. I think, based off of the way this is sorted by projection, obviously in that order as far as who you want to get the most exposure to, I think Vile is a pretty good volume guy. But Marvin Mims even had a deep target last week at some point in that game. Got broken up, but just him having a design play to him that was deep, if he catches that at 1,200 in a 37 total, that's a guy you're going to absolutely have to have. And he also got one of these sort of Chiefs kind of crazy wide receiver near the goal line plays on that 2-point conversion attempt in the fourth quarter. Didn't make it in, but I'm bringing up opportunities for points here at $1,200, and he's probably going to be 3% owned. So what do we do with all these guys? I feel like the clear-cut guy here, to me, he's around 30% in the flex, maybe 5% in the captain. I think those numbers will go up. But Sutton, to me, he's going to be my highest leverage over the field on the slate. And I'm going to sprinkle in all these guys with the field or above it. Probably above it, because I'm going under the narrative that Bo Nix is going to have a pretty decent passing game. And he's going to be in my captain spot a lot. So I'm going to have 2 of these guys probably. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think Alvin Kamara is a clear-cut captain number 1. Despite my rants on the running back section, that's obvious. Cortland Sutton is the captain number 2. He's just. Let me put it this way: you got a really young quarterback. You want him to build some confidence. What they should be doing is throwing to the grown-ass man who can make sure that he's getting some touchdown catches or getting some touchdown receptions. This was my theory. I'm going to digress a little bit. Back when the Raiders had Jamarcus Russell and Randy Moss, at some point, just throw the goddamn ball as far as you can to the best person on the field and see what happens. And I really think that this is an opportunity to do something like that. Cortland Sutton is a grown-ass man. He can go out there, get his 2 touchdowns, and make Bo Nix have a really good game. Outside of that, man, I think all of these other guys need to be in your player pool. Valet and Franklin are the clear, kind of the next 2 targets. But you need to sprinkle in Humphrey and Mims. It looks like Reynolds wasn't necessarily a core part of their offense, but he was getting a certain amount of targets and run in the game, right? With him being out, we saw the increased development, but he had no other targets since week 1, right? That was a high volume game of 8. So there is still some question mark there. Veli's probably going to be a pretty popular target, but kind of just what we were talking about in the last one, right? When you're going, if Veli's one of the last guys you're going to put in, rotate in one of these other guys. Mims is going to be 2% owned. Nobody wants to play Marvin Mims. Yep. We've all been burned for a year and a half. Little Jordan Humphrey, I promise you, is going to have a bullshit jet sweep touchdown in this game. It's going to happen. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. You got to have a little bit of exposure to these guys. All of these guys will be in my player pool. If they have a random dude active like A.T. Perry, he will be in my player pool.
Yeah, at one point, A.T. Perry was released a few weeks ago, and every time I see him on a Broncos slate, he's still in their player pool. He must have been re-signed to the practice squad. I don't know. I didn't do a deep dive into A.T. Perry besides the fact that this is a revenge game for him as well, but I don't expect to see him. As of right now, Cortland Sutton is 5% lower owned than Vile. And if I think that'll change as we get closer, if it doesn't, that's absolutely insane to me. If that's the case, I may just lock him. If he's that low owned, if he's coming in at 25% owned in the flex, and he's coming in at 5% or less in the captain spot, he might be just jam him in. And if he doesn't have a good game, then it is what it is. I'm doing a lot of bold things here, though, like fading Kamara at captain. I might not need to do any more bold takes besides that. Like you kind of said, just let it ride and uncheck him from the captain spot and kind of let it ride. All right, let's move on here. We got to go to the other side. Bub Means. That is a real person. He is a wide receiver in the NFL. Mason Tipton, 1,600. Cedric Wilson, the old vet. You can expect 1 or 2 touchdowns a year out of him. And usually when no one is ever going to play him is when he does it. Equanimous St. Brown, 200. I believe he's on the practice squad. I don't think he's been active this entire year, but he's going to be active for this one, obviously. He's always in play. He's $200. He's got that St. Brown blood in him. So I'm always going to play him. But what do we do? Look, I think to me, I feel like the Saints are not going to have an explosive pass game, but there's going to be some points to go around. In my opinion, at some point, they're going to be trailing by double digits in this game. The Saints are. They're going to have to throw the ball. Which guys are we picking here? Clearly, Bub Means is probably the guy you want to go with. Mixing a little Mason Tipton at 1,600. I think all these guys are in play. My wide receiver player pool and my exposure is going to be so spread out on all these random scrub dudes on both sides of the ball. Do you have a bold take on any of these guys?
No, if I'm going to prioritize them, I think it's Bub, just obviously based on what we saw last week. And then probably Cedric Wilson. I mean, he's just kind of the vet of this group, which not to be a dick to him. Sorry, Cedric, if you're watching. But he's not the best or the oldest guy out there, right? But at the same time, he's gonna be able to give some level of relief to Spencer Rattler. And this is a game that kind of just screams broken plays. And if there's one thing that we have seen him do, it's get free during broken plays or just weird random scramble action, right? When half your offensive line is dead, that's how Spencer Rattler is going to open a play. So, look, I think you said it right. You got to have all these guys in your player pool. I think you really prioritize Means. But outside of that, I think it's Wilson and then, Tipton, ESB, however you want, however you feel. Make sure you sprinkle them in, though. There's going to be a bullshit touchdown in this game.
Yeah.
If there's a game to have one, it's going to be this one. It could be a kicker, man. It could be a kicker with a fumble recovery. I'm saying it's going to be a weird game.
Let's go to tight end for the Saints. We got Juwan Johnson, 6,800. Foster Moreau, 2,800. These are guys that I'm comfortable playing a lot. Juwan Johnson, we've seen him have a high upside if he could stay healthy. He's 6,800. He's coming in around 15% owned. I think that's way too low for him. To me, he's the clear-cut number 2 offensive option on this team at this point. As far as reliability in the red zone, we know he can bring down some tough catches and score touchdowns. Foster Moreau, I know he's a blocking dude, but I feel like every time I watch a Saints game or every time I watch football, somehow, for whatever team it is, Foster Moreau is catching a football for 14 yards. I hear his name a lot, and I don't know why. I'm not going to forget about him in this one. He's coming in at under 5% owned. He's definitely a flex play that I'll mix in. Like I said, there's just so many damn dudes. I'm going to try to get to as many possible lineups as I could possibly build, maybe approaching 300, so I can get a decent amount of exposure to a lot of these guys and spread myself out. What are we doing with these tight ends? Because when it comes to the other side for Denver, I don't think we're going to be playing much of them. I think we can focus on these guys.
Yeah, man. I do like Juwan Johnson. I think you could probably get a little bit of captain exposure. This is again similar concept to what we were talking about with Cortland Sutton and having it out for the young quarterback. Juwan Johnson's a big target. Runs routes underneath linebackers and can free up some opportunities for some of the other receivers down the field. So I like him a lot. 6,800. He could easily end up in the optimal captains at the captain spot. Foster Moreau, again, at 2,800, he's still getting involved in the offense. Right, Taysom Hill getting all these tight end snaps. With him out the field, you got to spread that out. I'm just kidding. I know he's just kind of a wild card, but he's going to be on the field because of his excellence in the blocking, in the run blocking game. And to your point, like, I don't even know what team he's on at this point. You turn on TV, it doesn't matter if it's golf, he's scoring a touchdown somehow, right? Like, he's getting involved. I never thought that he would be the guy that we'd be seeing so much. Maybe it's like when you buy a certain car, you see it, just a bunch of confirmation bias because we know who he is now. But yeah, man, get a little bit of exposure to him. Again, these are big targets, the safety nets for young quarterbacks who really just need a valve to when they're scrambling or trying to stay alive.
And I think a big reason why I'm remembering him so much or just noticing him is because on the broadcast they always call him Morrow,
Yeah,
and that feels so wrong. Because I mean, is it like they obviously did their research? Were they sitting in a meeting with Foster Morrow and confirmed that that was the correct pronunciation of his name? I don't know, but I'm calling him Foster Moreau because that sounds way cooler. Let's go to kickers and defense. So, SaberSim right now is not projecting the ownership correctly. There's just no way, because I'm seeing Broncos defense at 15%. There's just no way that that's accurate. It's a 37 total. It's a Thursday night game. Nobody knows who to damn play. People are going to be playing defenses. And it feels like to me, Broncos defense could be 30+% owned, maybe 5-7% in the captain. Going against Spencer Rattler, going up against a devastated offense and what is already a pretty damn good defense, even though they're missing a couple guys. Broncos defense, 4,800. Saints defense, 5,200. I don't mind either of them, to be honest. But we got Will Lutz and Blake Grupe. It's a dome game. We know how, the kicker struggled a little bit the other day in the win there. But we know how valuable kickers have been on Showdown slate, and there's no way you can avoid them, especially in a 37 total where, a field goal, an extra point, a 50-yarder, an extra point, and a 30-yarder, that probably immediately puts you in the optimal in a game like this. What else is there to say? No bold take here. Play the kickers, play the defenses. I know that they're probably going to be popular, but there's plenty of ways that we can get different. And if you think about the uncertainties behind a lot of these skill position players in this game, getting a Broncos defense that maybe gets you 7 fantasy points, even if they have they don't have a lot of sacks or maybe they don't have an interception, still get you about 7 fantasy points. That is appealing, especially in cash or single entry. What do you think?
yeah. Look, there's just too many offensive line injuries from the Saints with a rookie quarterback that, like, I don't think you can. I don't think you can not play the Broncos defense. You're going to have to. If they give up 21 points, but they still have 4 sacks and 2 picks. Like, they may still be in the optimal, and they're not going to give up 21 points. So, and then as far as the kickers go, I mean, we're 37 point total. That's what, 20-17. That's what, 3 field goals implied there. So, I mean, yeah, you do the math. Right. So, like, that's kind of where we're at. I mean, you need to have some of these, and I may even have lineups that's some dumb bullshit like Henry Miller at captain, and then Will Lutz, Blake Grupe, Saints, Broncos, right? Or whatever. So, like, be creative. I think this is a slate that you can do stuff like that for.
All right, let's get to our crown their ass here.
Now, if you want to crown them, then crown their ass.
Ellie, you're going Bo Nix. I'm going Cortland Sutton. Obviously, the best captain play is Alvin Kamara. Everybody knows that. That's why he's going to be 40 plus potentially owned in the captain spot. He's clearly the best play. But guess what? If you're playing in a tournament with 200,000 entries, how the hell are you going to get different with a captain that's 40% owned? So a guy like Sutton, right now he's coming in under 5% in the captain. I think that goes up, but if that stays pretty close, I'm going to be jamming a lot of him in. I think Nix is my second favorite captain as well. And you could obviously talk about Javonte. You can talk about the Broncos defense. I typically don't play kickers at captain. This might be a night where 1 or 2 of them slips through the crack and maybe makes it into a couple of my builds. But to me, I feel like based on the ownership and based off of how I think this game is going to go, where the Broncos come out and pass the ball a bit better, and they continue their their fourth quarter performance into this game maybe a little bit. I think that this is the way to go for captain, minus your obvious Kamara pick. All right, let's go into our Kimes. We got to rename this just so we can actually say it. This is our Steve Keim play of the night. Guys that we know we shouldn't be playing, but we still are going to. And I think that basically every player on this slate is
no other than Steve Keim. I'm like, come on, bro.
Is kind of qualified. Like, there's so many randos. I don't even. Are you gonna? Is this little Jordan Humphrey for you just because of the revenge? And he's got a cool ass name. Is that what you're going here?
No, it's just I am going that way, but it's not because of that. It's just because, like, for whatever reason, I think that he's going to do something stupid. I really think he's going to have a dumbass end around or jet sweep touchdown.
I'm probably going to go Estime.
But yes, that's my play.
Or Equanimous St. Brown, just because I like saying his name. There's no other reason besides that. All right, let's get to our lineup builds here. Throw us a like, guys. We appreciate it. Let's get to 50 likes for this video. Subscribe. Oops, that's not the right thing. Let's go to this one. Okay, so let's build it. Let's build a Kamara lineup. I know we've just talked about this entire day, talking about for GPPs not playing Kamara at captain. I'm not telling you to do that because that's potential suicide, but that's what I'm going to do. But I'm going to play him in the single entries. So let's build a lineup with him at captain for single entry. So what do we do here? You want to just jam in both quarterbacks because of that floor is relatively high, touching the ball every play. Do we want to just immediately throw in Broncos defense here and a kicker?
Do it, yeah.
Which kicker do we want?
Let's throw in not Groupie. Let's throw in the Broncos kicker, Will Lutz.
All right.
Wasn't Lutz on the Saints at one point too?
Yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. I keep talking about these players and I forget that I'm talking about the other team. All right, so this is interesting. So salary does kind of matter for these single entries when you're building with Kamara at captain. But I'm comfortable, grabbing one of these guys like Franklin or Moreau or Kendry Miller potentially. I'm usually playing these $15 or $5 single entries, like basically all of them, and those have quite a bit of entries into them. So, playing a guy like Kendry Miller here along with Kamara at captain is an interesting build, especially with the Broncos defense. But just pick your poison. Literally flip coin, spin the wheel, and fill in this last spot. Let's pull out the kicker here. Let's see if we can get up to. No, we can't get Javonte Williams. We can get like Juwan Johnson. Like, how do we get to Sutton and Javonte here for a single entry? Let's put them in. No, we can't do that. So Kamara at captain, you are a little limited with your builds. But for GPPs, I feel like, we're going to get a little bit easier. Let's build. I'm not going to waste time. We're already at 53 minutes here. So I'm not going to build a GPP build with Kamara because I'm not going to have to worry about that. But who should we go with here? You want to go with Bo Nix here for GPP?
Yeah, let's do Bo Nix.
All right, so let's pair him with Sutton, right? What other guy do you want to pair him with?
Let's put in Will Lutz in the Broncos defense, and then I think we just find out what we want from.
All right, so we got 7,400 a pop here for two positions. So do we want to just throw Kamara in the flex?
Yeah, do it.
All right, so that leaves us with Franklin.
Kendry Miller.
Any of these guys. I actually like that. Kamara, Miller, a lot of dump off passes, potential goal line opportunities. That's pretty interesting. But you could pick your poison. You could literally make 10 lineups off of this one, off these top 5 players and just switch out that last one. Let's build with. I'm curious to see based off of building with Kamara and getting a little bit more expensive with Sutton here, how flexible we're going to be. So let's pair Sutton with Nix. You want to fade Spencer Rattler in this one? You want to do like a 4-2 or a 5-1?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, so let's go ahead and put Kamara in the flex. It leaves us with about 4,000 a pop. So salary is going to matter here, but we're still going to be able to get some of these random guys that are going to be on the field a lot. So where do we go here, man? Do you want to like grab our like a punt value here? A guy like Marvin Mims or Tipton.
So this might be an interesting one to throw in a guy like a teammate if you're looking for value like that.
Yeah, you're right.
And then you can kind of maybe go like means, and then what does that give us? Is that what's his name?
Bub means. So Kamara means that leaves us 8,200. We can get Juwan Johnson. I might just go down to a Bronco. I mean, we could go Will Lutz. We could go McLaughlin.
Thanks.
Yeah, so 2,800. I mean, that's nothing. Like, I'll leave that on the table all day. I got no issues with that at all. So, look, if you're hand building, best of luck, honestly. I fully plan to embrace, dialing in some caps on some guys, unchecking Kamara for tournaments at captain, and letting it ride with the contest sims, letting Saber Sim do its thing, and maybe using 2 uniques potentially on a slate like this. I don't always love to do that. But with a slate with this many unknowns, 2 uniques is probably the way to go. What'd you learn, Ellie? Feels like we can do a lot. We didn't even mess around with some of these rando like cheap captains and just being able to leave like 5,000 on the table potentially. That's going to be obviously in play. But I think Sutton, Bo Nix, those are the guys that we're going to go with. Feel free to play plenty of Kamara. Just make sure you somehow get way different. And I don't even know how you would begin to do that when you're building rules. Maybe do 1-5s. I don't know. So what'd you learn, Ellie?
Yeah, I think I came in this slate being a little bit more willing to cap my salary like 1,000, but or like 49,000. But I think even with pulling Alvin Kamara out of the captain spot, you're still going to need to cap it close to 47 or less. You just got to be willing to play whomever. I mean, once you took him out of the captain, even with Sutton, it was pretty smooth sailing. Yeah. So like you just got to be willing to not fill out your salary.
So maybe if you are wanting to build with Kamara for tournaments, which is not a bad idea at all, maybe leave a ridiculous, maybe build a handful of lineups with a ridiculous amount of money on the table, like $5,000 or something. I really think that's probably the way to do it if you are going to build with Kamara captain. All right, guys, we'll see you later. Ellie will try to record a Monday Night Football video this weekend for you guys. We appreciate you, and we'll see you later.